Hello and welcome to another tutorial video here from Zenatta Consulting. My name is Tyler Colt, and boy, do I have a big one for you here today. So in this video, we're going to be talking through a huge new update for Zoho CRM that's called CRM for Everyone. Essentially, these are a bunch of new features that are going to allow you to carve up your users into various teams and give them kind of a different look and feel, a different UI, and even very different permissions around controlling a lot of the core modules in your CRM. So before I jump into the walkthrough, I do want to ask, if you find this video useful, please be sure to like and subscribe down below. That really helps us out and make sure that YouTube shows you videos like this in the future. If it sparks any questions, feedback, or additional video requests, please do leave those in the comment section as we try to read through each and every one of those on a weekly basis. So without any further ado, let us jump right on into the walkthrough. So I'm going to be breaking down this walkthrough into like two main sections. First section is just going to be covering kind of the changes to the UI, where things are now, how to navigate through the system, because there are some pretty significant changes that are going to be included with CRM for Everyone. Then in the second half, I'm going to go over some of the specifically new features, right? Because there's kind of two main parts, right? There's just the redo of what you already have. And then there's all of the new stuff that you can do with team modules, team spaces, request permissions, yada, yada, yada. So we're going to jump into section 1 now, which will just be kind of a side-by-side of the old CRM versus the new. So here I am inside of the new CRM for Everyone view. I'll kind of switch back and forth here, where this green top bar is kind of the old view of CRM. And this new view here over on the left, where all of our modules here, is that CRM for Everyone view. So as you'll notice, there are a few changes right off the bat that we can see. So in CRM for Everyone, the module list is going to run down the left-hand side, whereas in the previous CRM version, everything is going to run across the top. Navigating into modules, so if I were to like open leads in my old CRM versus open leads in my new one, you'll get a very similar view. So you've still got that ability to sort with custom views. You'll still have all of your custom buttons, right? You'll have any of these actions that you've always had, but it's just going to change that view such that modules are going to run down the left-hand side. And that's going to apply for really each and every one of these modules that are running down the side of the page. Now, something that is a little bit different with CRM for Everyone is that you now have these little 3 dots in each of the modules. And what these are is essentially the ability to actually do system customization from the front end of the platform, right? So previously, if I wanted to add a layout rule, for example, to the leads module, I would go into settings, I'd go into modules and fields, I'd open up my leads, and then I have my list of layout rules. And the layout rule, of course, is just, requiring a field based on another or things like that. Now with the new UI, I can just click, plus, right? And in here, I've got access to my layout rules. I can just click and get right into the creation of one of those rules. So an important note here is that because a lot of the customization features are being brought into the front end, where I don't actually need to dig through settings to get to them, it will be very important that you go in and limit your access controls for that customization. I know a lot of users out there kind of just have everybody in either the administrator or the standard user profile. Thing to keep in mind is that standard has a lot of permissions, right? A standard user can add a workflow. They can add a layout rule, right? They can do things now that could be disruptive to your workflow. So just really important to go in and lock in those profiles and permissions to make sure that people who shouldn't have access to these things aren't going to stumble onto them and start making changes to the system, right? Back in the day, when all of those customization features are kind of nested within settings, a lot of people just aren't going to find them. So even if they had the permission to do it, it would never really be an issue. Well, now it's all right here. So it's really important that you go in and lock down those permissions and profiles for each and every different type of user to make sure that you're not going to cause any problems where someone now like makes a field required that shouldn't be, or adds a workflow that's sending emails that you didn't want to have go out. So just be really cognizant that these 3 dots are now here and they're impactful. So big difference there between the old UI and the new. That's going to apply as well with this little top button up here, this plus. This button can actually add a completely new module, right? Where again, previously I've got to go into settings, I've got to go into modules and fields, and then from here I have access to do that. So if a user had this permission, they're probably not going to stumble onto the actual ability to do it, where now they've got this big old plus button, looks really inviting. I definitely want to click it. So you can imagine that your team is going to want to do the same. So just be super aware that those buttons are now here and they're in the front end of the platform. So we need to be really careful with our permissions. One big change as well is kind of the processing of what used to be called tab groups, but are now called team spaces. So over here inside of the old CRM view, this little top left section, this all tabs, right? These are essentially what are called tab groups. And previously, really all that a tab group was like a way to filter which modules are going to come into the top of the page here. So like if I were to change over to like, Google Drive, right? Now there's a lot less modules that are showing up. Whereas here with team spaces, and we'll dive into this more in the back end of the walkthrough, these are much more impactful, right? You're going to be assigning profiles and users and roles and all different types of workflows are actually now able to be unique within a particular team space. So we're going to want to be really intentional with how these are set up. It's probably a good idea if you have a bunch of old tab groups, now is your time to clean those up, right? Because they're all going to get converted into team spaces and they're going to need to be used differently going forward. One thing that I do really like with this new UI is some of these little side jewels. So I'm going to go through each of these. So up here at the top, this little like folder icon, this little envelope, these are all your modules, right? These are your rows and columns, right? The actual data that are in each of your CRM modules that are just being showed here under the little blue tab. What's nice is that for things like reports and dashboards, those are now broken out into their own little side jewels. The reason that I like this is that in my head, like looking at a report is pretty different than like looking at, your leads list, your deals list, etc. So I kind of like that they're not just blended into the modules anymore, right? They've actually got their own little carve out here now, rather than just being like one of many entries on this list of module data. And so that's going to be the same here for reports as well as dashboards, where these are now carved out into their own little subsections. Within the modules, they work about the same. So we're not going to go too far down the rabbit hole there. If you're comfortable with reports and dashboards, you're still going to be comfortable with them. They're just pulling them out into their own sections so that they're not being blended in with the kind of list of all the raw data that are in your modules. Requests, we're going to come back to. This is a totally new feature inside of Team Spaces. So we'll come back to that one in just a moment. But we also now have a tab for the marketplace, as well as a tab for a global search, right? So here within this search, this is a pretty big improvement. It's really just giving us the ability to search across many modules in a much more easy to interact with way. So like if we look here, we've got like our deals and accounts. So let's say we want to find something related to this Truler, record. If I go ahead and search that, it does a lot better job now at kind of grouping everything within the various modules. It kind of cleaned up the UI here in the search. And then what you can also do if you're like a Zoho One user is this search across Zoho, right? Which again, not going to go down the rabbit hole, but this will actually pull data from a bunch of different applications that are all related to that record. So even like you've had a click conversation about this account, they've submitted a desk ticket, we've got a Zoho project open, whatever it may be, you're able to search for that much more easily now with this global search. Down here at the bottom left, we've got this add new button. A lot of the times, like if somebody wants to make a lead, they're going to go to leads and then they're going to click create lead. But you can actually now create records from this one unified button. So no matter where you are in the system, you could go and like add a lead, add a deal, whatever it may be that you need to do, all just from this one consolidated place. They've also broken out the calendar a little bit here. So rather than just being in that meetings module, you can more easily just cut to your calendar view with this little side jewel. Signals, this is really the same as signals have always been. They've just moved them to the bottom left instead of the top right. And then now the settings and your like personal settings and profile are down here in the bottom left. While I'm in here, I will highlight if you're using the new version and want to switch back, you'll do this under your little icon. And then the settings tab will bring you into the kind of full back end of the Zoho CRM settings. So one of the things you'll notice like right off the bat here is that the settings module looks pretty darn different. So here I'm looking at the old one where when you go into settings, you essentially have each of these different kind of like bubble groupings of the various applications or various subsections of settings. Now all of them are essentially grouped into this running left-hand list. So really all these are the same settings. There's a couple new ones that we'll cover in a moment, but they're just organized differently. The one thing that I'll highlight, and it's something I always try to remind myself to do, is use this search bar. Right? This thing is really useful and it's going to get you where you need to go a lot faster than scrolling. Like even in this old one, it's kind of a good habit to come in and just search, right? Rather than like, oh, where am I going? Oh, is it under automation or is it in developer hub? It can get a little bit tricky. So we do recommend making sure to just use that search, right? And make things a little bit easier on yourself as you're looking through the various subsections of settings. So with that, we've kind of covered the big UI differences between the two systems. It's really nothing too crazy, right? Like the big thing that I just really want to emphasize is that a lot of those customization features are being brought to the front end. Everything from layout rules to workflow rules, right? Like automated communications, right? Those are now right in front of people that can be set up and actually configured by users. We'll jump in and kind of get into how you can control these more granularly as well. As we get into the team spaces section. I always just like to highlight some of those things that can get you caught up a little bit, which is, just bringing a lot of that stuff here into the light of day, if you will, rather than being hidden behind the scenes. All right, so with those differences in UI out of the way, what we're going to do next is actually jump into some of the new functionality that's going to be supported with CRM for everyone. A lot of that is going to center around your team spaces, of course, which can be selected down here in the bottom right. So I'm going to click on Manage Team Space and we will jump on in. So this CRM team space, this is kind of like the default one. It's got everything in it. What you may want to do with something like this is just come in and make sure that it's not assigned to all users. If this one is assigned to all users, you're going to kind of defeat the purpose, right? Where people are just going to come in and see everything in the system. So I'm going to change that. And let's say it's only for like me, the admin, or a couple of executive team members that really know how to navigate the system and should be able to go wherever they want. But let's say we're going to create a new one here for the sales team. So we'll call this the sales team space. Give it a description. And then the important thing that we need to do here is add some modules. And I'm going to do this really intentionally because we want to make sure that we include only the data that they need, but we're also going to employ one of my favorite new things in CRM for everyone, which is the folders of modules. It essentially is going to give us a much smoother way to add these modules into an organizational structure. So we're going to create a folder here and we're going to assign this folder as customers. And this is where we're going to put like accounts, contacts, and deals to kind of break them out from something like leads, which are going to be those like very, those records that we have not yet qualified. So I'm going to add the leads module and I'm going to add that to root, meaning it's going to be like a top level module. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that customers folder and I'm going to add accounts, contacts, and deals. And so now we'll have a little submenu here of each of these records all nested within a parent, right? So another one that we may want to do, harkening back to the old days of CRM, is something like an activities folder, right? And here is where I might put like tasks, calls, if I can spell correctly, always a struggle for me, and activities and meetings, right? So now I have these like subfolders that I'm starting to create that will just allow the team to get around the system a little bit easier. Another important one, if you're using like the CRM transactional records, might be a transactions folder. And here I could put like my quotes, my sales order, my invoice, right? Any of these like sales transactions that may be relevant for a particular sales user, right? And so as you could imagine, as you look through all these modules, one of the really important things is just taking your time to get these things set up nicely. Like here we'll go in, we'll add products to the transactions folder. And we can kind of skim through and see, okay, do we need any of these other pieces of information for a salesperson? Maybe they both want like, maybe we'll create one last one here for like a marketing folder. and we'll put our campaigns and our web form submissions in that, right? So now we've essentially created these groupings of modules that are going to organize the data in a more easy to understand way for our team. And where this really, really helps out is when you're bringing a new user on board, right? Because it's really tricky. Like when a new person opens up a CRM, they just see like 20 modules running down the side of the page, right? But really, a lot of those modules are contextually linked, right? Like accounts, contacts, and deals are all part of that like view of your customers or prospects. So we can bring all those together using the folders. Now down here at the bottom, we can also sub-select and say if they should get access to reports and or dashboards. We're going to say yes in this case. Sales team members oftentimes do use those, right? Like their dashboards to track KPIs, reports to maybe get like filtered views of data that they want to work, maybe pipeline with open tasks, things like that. And then what you can do is actually come in and assign this particular team space to various roles, profiles, as well as groups. Right? So maybe everybody that's in like the basic profile should get access to this, as well as any administrators, right? And here's where if you have like a sales role or a sales profile, you can just assign them here. I strongly recommend primarily using your roles and profiles to assign out these team spaces, because what that will mean is in the future, when you add new users, once you've put them in the appropriate role, they will just get all of this access right out of the gate, and you won't need to worry about particularly giving them each and every module, going through any of the team spaces that might be relevant for them. As you could imagine, there are profiles that might have access to more than one of these, right? Like you might have a customer experience team member and they need to get into sales, marketing, and support, right? Because they kind of are responsible for that entire customer journey. So doing this based on your profiles and roles is going to save you a ton of time, and make sure that like you don't onboard somebody and then they're like, hey, where's all that stuff I'm supposed to have? And you're like, darn, yeah, let me go in and fix that for you. So now that we have this set up, I'm going to go ahead and save it. Again, you'll end up with many different team spaces organizing your data, especially as you integrate more and more different Zoho apps into here, right? Like you'll be able to show the desk data for certain people, the projects data for others, and really just get granular with what people actually need access to as they're coming into the system and working. So what is this actually going to look like, right? Once we have it all set up. So let's go back to our homepage. I'm looking at our list of modules here on the left, and then I can choose into that sales module. And what we'll see here, right, is that now each of these things is organized under the particular section that is relevant for us, right? So this customers data is under the customers folder, activities, transactions, etc. And it just creates kind of a nicer, cleaner view into being able to view all those modules within the contextual wrappers that make the most sense for them. The last thing that I do want to show here is essentially the ability to submit requests. And so in order to show how the requests functionality will work, I'm first going to have to show you how team modules work. This is another new feature that's rolled out here for CRM for everyone. And it's really just specific to the creation of a new module. So again, we can go into the backend settings to create modules like we used to, or we can just click this plus button. And here what we'll see is that there's essentially two different types of modules. There's an organization module, which is like exactly what you're used to, right? This is a module that you add. By default, everyone will be able to see it. And then you could use your profiles and permissions to essentially trim down anyone who shouldn't have access to this module. Or we can now create things as a team module. And the team module is really interesting because really what you're doing here is you're creating a module, you're assigning it to a team space, and you're saying people within this team space should have some extra abilities within this module, right? Because maybe this is just for them, right? This is something that only the sales team is ever going to have to think about. And so we're going to let them do some customization. We're going to let them add a workflow, right? But maybe they can't do it to the deals because everyone uses that, but they can do it in a different module that's connected to the deals. So we're going to add a team module here. And one thing, again, they're doing a lot more of this across many Zoho apps, is they are rolling out some initial templates for modules. So we actually are going to use one of those here today. Each of these, realistically, you're going to need to customize them, right, when you actually get in here and start working within the system. But they can still be a really useful tool just to get you started, right? Kind of moving down a particular path. So let's say that you're selling software, or maybe you do site visits, and so you want to have a demo request, right? And this is going to be a module that really is unique to the sales team, right? Like from the marketing perspective, from the project onboarding perspective, we're going to work off of the deals, right? But the demo request is just an easy way for our sales team to essentially make sure that they are tracking anybody who wants to have a demo. So I'm creating this module. I am making it from a template. And what we'll see is that within here, right, it's giving us some specific example fields. What you're going to want to do is just make sure you review each of these. Like maybe this will be a demo name. And maybe for a demo, we'll just make this like an auto number field. So called demo 1, demo 2, demo 3. Suffix, we'll say, just to be quick here, we're not going to think too much about that. Then we can look at like these other fields. So demo requested by, this is like a text field. I don't really care about that. I'd much rather see like a lookup field. So this requested by, this is a field that's linking to our contacts. So we like that. Call this a demo request. Maybe we also want to add a lookup to our deal, right? So I can come in here, add a lookup. We'll drag it up in the list, up to requested by. We'll call it the deal. And we'll link it up accordingly. There it is. Maybe we'll also go ahead and add a lookup to the account, right? Just to be safe, make sure that everything is going to roll up nicely. So we can go ahead and add that here. And what we'll see as we're looking at each of these fields, not the auto number, because this kind of just is going to do its own thing, but something like the requested by, we can essentially come in and determine who should have particular access to this module, or to this field within this module, I should say. And so the different types of groupings that'll come into a team space and a team module are essentially admins, managers, members, participants, and requesters. And so we can determine for each of these different groups, who do we actually want to give particular access to for any of these fields. So what you'll really see with the team modules is you can get very granular with the permissions within that particular team space. So there are going to be some advantages to kind of figuring out which modules need to be organization-wide, and then which modules should be unique to a team space to kind of open up some of these more granular permissions. Last thing we'll do here is we will put it under a folder. We're going to put this as part of our customers folder because it's going to connect primarily to the deal. That's like really where people are going to work with this data at the end of the day. And then we will create this module. So it's going to do that in the background, and now it has been added. So here, really, it's just that simple. We now have this demo request. If I were to come into a deal and maybe add a related demo request, again, opening up records, things look basically identical to how they used to. This team module is going to work just like any other module will, right? Where we can come in, we can make this record, we can go ahead and link it up to the appropriate data. We'll say this is a demo and it's planned, and then we'll go ahead and save it. And so now we have that demo request just linked up to a deal. But so what can we do to get a bit more granular with this? Kind of what is unique about these team modules? So a lot of that is going to come in with the user access and user profiles. So if we go in and manage user access, right, what we can see is that because only a certain user has been added to this team space, they're the only one who's in here as a particular member. And so what we can do is actually add a user to a particular role within this module. And so if we go through, let's just do a quick overview of what each of these are going to do. So a manager is basically like a mini admin for this module, right? So they're able to create, view, delete, really do any of those record actions within the demo requests module. Members are really just going to have access to their own data, right? So this would be like a salesperson would probably be a member, right? Like the demo requests that are assigned to them, they can do whatever they want, but other demo requests, they cannot. A participant is going to be pretty similar to a member, but they just don't have view all, right? So a member can see everything, but only interact with their own stuff. A participant can not see everything, but can interact with their own records. And then a requester can essentially only create and view their own records by submitting a request. And so again, that request is essentially just a submission to a module that can then be approved by a manager of that module. So if we were to go ahead and add a salesperson, realistically, I'd probably add them as a participant, right? I just don't like to have people see data that they don't really need access to. Again, though, that's kind of a determination that you'll need to make as you are interacting with this module. Once you've assigned somebody, you can always move them around. So maybe we want to make them like a requester instead. That's going to be totally fine. And they'll be able to submit those requests related to this particular module. Now, the other section here is the Manage Profiles section. This is where you can actually get more detailed about the particular abilities of each of these profiles within a team module. And so here we can essentially define what should they be able to do with like import, export, send email, mass email, mail merge, all this good stuff. For a lot of these, right, you're going to want to turn off like the import export, right? Like I generally don't think that like normal users need to be doing that. Maybe like changing owner, right? Like, no, you can't go in there and assign a deal that you don't want to work anymore to the coworker, right? So you can come in and kind of customize each of these particular actions, as well as coming in and customizing each of the particular fields. Again, this is a lot, right? There's a lot to customize, a lot to control. It's going to take you a little bit of time to get all of this stuff configured, and that's totally fine. What you're going to want to do is essentially start setting up these team spaces behind the scenes. Keep everybody on that all CRM space for now. And then once you feel good about the team spaces, start to move them over, right? And like remove people from the all CRM and put them into their particular buckets just to make things a little more trimmed down and easy to interact with here inside of CRM. So I think that's going to cover it here for today for this initial tutorial of CRM for everyone. If there are any features or functionalities you feel like we didn't cover in enough detail, please do drop those in the comments section down below. I know this is a lot of change, right? So if I missed something, I always want to know about that so I can get a new video out for you guys to be able to see all of the new features and abilities here with the new platform. So if you did find this video useful, please be sure to like and subscribe down below, as that really does help us out. And as always, thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time.